Welcome to Hamburgers and Horror, the home of meat, monsters, and mutating tentacled aliens. I'm Noah Hook, and today we're starting our Summer of Creature features with the 2006 black comedy body horror extravaganza, Slither. Slither takes place when an asteroid lands in a small South Carolina town, and a man is taken over by an alien parasite inside of it. The man begins to transform and take over the town's residents with a wide variety of methods, as he tries to rekindle the relationship with his terrified wife. Slither was written and directed by James Gunn in his directorial debut. Gunn is the director of the Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy and the upcoming Suicide Squad sequel. He actually got his start writing for Troma and broke into bigger pictures writing the Scooby-Doo movie and Dawn of the Dead remake. There was of course the very controversial firing and rehiring of Gunn at Disney after a bunch of old offensive tweets were leaked, but I figure that's something most of you know about and have opinions on already, so I'll leave it at that. Gunn has cited the Cronenberg film Shivers as well as Junji Ito's manga Uzumaki as big influences on the film. It also bears a lot of resemblance to Fred Decker's Night of the Creeps, and fans of the film were actually upset with what they considered to be a blatant ripoff, but Slither pays homage to a ton of different horror films, and I'm sure you'll pick up on a few throughout the film. The cinematography was done by Greg Middleton, who would later go on to do Game of Thrones and the Watchmen series. It also has a fun score by Tyler Bates, who has worked on a slew of TV shows, films, and video games. The special effects and makeup are a huge part of this movie, and there are a ton of people in those departments who deserve recognition. The creature designs and practical effects were led by Todd Masters and his team at Masters FX, which has worked on Tales from the Crypt, Dexter, Sinister, Snakes on a Plane, and The Predator, just to name a few. A few more people of note include John Godecki, the visual effects supervisor, Nicholas Podbury, the lead puppeteer, and Mike Manzel, one of the many special effects artists. Slither had a total budget of $30 million and was actually a box office flop, only making $13 million back. This is generally blamed on people just not having much interest in horror comedies at the time, but the people who did come out to see it actually pretty much enjoyed themselves. It currently has an 86 and 63% on Rotten Tomatoes, so it definitely has some fans, but it's also clear this isn't a movie for the squeamish. Slither went on to have a couple successful home releases, and it has become a bit of a cult classic since its release. This is actually my first time watching Slither. I had seen images of the final creature, but I just never got around to watching it. I have a feeling it's a movie probably up my alley, but I guess it's time to find out. Better plug in your curling irons, cause we're watching Slither. The movie begins with a space rock hurtling towards our beautiful planet. Lollygagging officers Wally and Billy, played by Don Thompson and Nathan Fillion, are speedometering birds and napping when the asteroid lands right behind them in Wheelsy, South Carolina. A wandering woodland shot brings us to the opened up rock and the title card, as we get an idea of what the town of Wheelsy and its vulgar mayor Jack McCready, played by Greg Henry, are like. Science teacher Starla Grant, played by Elizabeth Banks, is educating her ugly, pervy class on Darwinism, and later she's picked up by her husband Grant, played by Michael Rooker. And yes, his name is Grant Grant. Billy and his officer pals discuss the couple. Starla grew up dirt poor and was a single mother when Grant swept in with lots of money. But money can't make your much younger wife horny all the time, and the pissed off husband goes out for a walk. His journey takes him to a bar with awful karaoke where a local named Brenda plops down next to him. She's apparently had a crush on him since childhood, and the proof is in the tree carving in the middle of the woods. They start making out, but to my surprise, Grant actually rejects her offer of woodland coitus as he wants to get back to Starla. That's when Grant notices the asteroid and a slimy trail heading deeper into the woods. They find a translucent slug-looking creature which is competing with the facehuggers for creepiest sexual imagery, and it shoots a barb into Grant's chest, and that little bugger wriggles right into him. Grant convulses and we get an internal view as the barb inserts itself into his brainstem. Brenda wakes the bloody new host, who just goes the fuck home, I guess. And Grant is hungry for meat. The next morning, I think he's making a leaf nest in the basement when he's beckoned up to the living room. Starla is playing their favorite song and wants to rekindle their romantic side, apologizing for last night. The speechless Grant starts crying and downplays his alien stab as a bug bite, and the two get freaky off screen. Apparently it was really good, like Grant was discovering her all over again. and she thinks he's changing for the better. Grant is checking out the meats and orders 14 ribeyes, saying he has a surprise for Starla. Ooh boy, look at all that meat. Starla questions why he has locked the basement door, and he says he has a surprise for her birthday, which is still 2 months away. Something creepy crawls inside Grant, and he writhes in pain outside. The smile he gives this poor dog tells me he's hungry again, and the pooch whimpers off screen. The two are getting ready to go out, and Grant is developing a skin infection. Starla hops in the shower, and some tentacles pop out of Grant's chest. The tentacles are hungry for Starla flesh, but his love for her is able to keep him under control. Starla almost spots his tentacles, but he rushes out, saying he'll meet her at the deer cheer, and the deer cheer looks like a great time. Billy and Wally are drinking what I assume is Bud Light, and it's clear he's had a crush on Starla for a while. Brenda and her big-ass baby are watching The Toxic Avenger when she gets a knock on the door from Grant, and she happily brings him inside. Billy and Starla get to chatting, but she thwarts a very thick sexual tension. While the mayor makes a bizarre speech about man's dominion over nature and deer hunting, Grant overlooks Brenda's baby in a bad way. He unbuttons his shirt to the deer season countdown, revealing his nasty tentacles. The locals all yeehaw around to some country music while Grant attacks Brenda. His tentacles pierce into her stomach and insert larvae, which is unsurprisingly uncomfortable. Starla returns home to find the power out, and Grant isn't looking too good. He says he was stung by a bee and had an allergic reaction, but the doctors say he'll be fine. Starla calls their doctor that morning, and he obviously wasn't visited by Grant. He bags up some of his meat and heads to an abandoned barn in the woods. Here he's keeping Brenda chained up, where she complains about starving and her belly looks really big. But Grant offers a delicious trash bag full of raw meat, and Brenda starts scarfing it down. Billy and Wally arrive at the Grant house and ask if she knows Brenda, as she is missing there and were signs of a struggle in her home. Apparently people witnessed Grant going into her house, and they'd like to talk to him when he returns home. Properly spooked, she breaks down the lock to see what's in the basement. She finds his plastic fort filled with a variety of dead pets and wild animals. She immediately calls Billy back, but she just leaves him a frantic message as Grant watches from outside. And Grant don't like that. He beats her to the back door and takes her down, concerned that he's too ugly for her now. He says he can't trust her anymore and unleashes his tummy tentacles. She smacks him with a lamp before they can burrow in, but he starts choking her out with his big flexible arm. Billy shows up with more cops for some reason, which is enough to scare the snarling Grant away, and Billy and Wally can't find him. 3 days pass and the mayor is on Bill's ass about finding Grant ASAP. Apparently the townsfolk are scared to hunt while he's on the loose, and that's Wheelsy's biggest moneymaker. The mayor tries to downplay Grant's bendy arm as Lyme disease, which gets him laughed at by the police force. They get a call about another attack on a farm where Grant has been stealing animals. Did I say stealing? I meant eviscerating. He even dragged a cow off. They figure he's in the nearby woods and traveling east to attack all the farms on the edge of town. They're going to lay low on the next farm in his path, and they pull out the big guns. But Bill decides to leave their one confiscated grenade behind. Starla catches Bill before he leaves and begs to join them on the stakeout to help, as she feels whatever is going on is partially her fault. She says the only way to find Brenda is to bring Grant in alive, and that's enough to convince them. The cops and the mayor arrive at the Strootmeyers, and they hide amongst the livestock until nightfall. The mayor is being gross, and Bill and Starla recount childhood memories. McCready notices a much more monstrous Grant heading towards the farm, and he approaches this innocent poor cow. Grant kills the bovine, and Starla rushes ahead to confront him. She follows him with the cops and hunters not far behind, and he looks fucking beautiful. She tries to comfort him, promising that they want to help him get better as they surround him. She promises to stick by his side, but Grant's communication mostly comes out as snarls now. He begins to retreat, but this hunter stands in his way, demanding to know where he's keeping Brenda. Grant whips a tentacle at the guy, and it cuts him right in half. Fuck yeah. The cops open fire, and Grant slithers away into the woods. The cops, hunters, Starla, and the mayor chase after him, and Wally spots him in the stream. They lose Grant, but Bill follows some slime to the Brenda barn. It smells awful, and Bill can hear crying from inside. They open the doors and find Brenda in all of her round, bloated glory. Bill asks what the hell is going on, but all Brenda can do is complain about how hungry she is. as she spies a tasty possum snack. Her body starts jiggling and her skin starts tearing. Bill realizes Grant led them there on purpose, and Brenda bursts into thousands of alien slugs, which enter Wally's mouth, as well as swarming Deputy Trevor, Mayor McCready, and these two red shirt cops. The slugs swarm Bill, Starla, and Deputy Margaret, but Bill tells them to cover their mouths. That, simply enough, thwarts the slugs and they head out into the woods. Everyone who swallows one collapses, but it looks like the mayor kept them out of his gullet as well. The slugs head to the Strootmeyer house, where daughter Kylie, played by Tanya Saulnier, is taking a not-so-bubbly bath. The slugs begin their invasion on the house, but Kylie doesn't notice while she argues with Mom and puts in her headphones. The mom says goodnight to her two younger daughters as the slugs make their way inside there and the bathroom. The little slimy boy makes its way into the tub and paddles towards Kylie. She finally notices and jumps out of the tub, but the slug crawls up her back and into her mouth. She grabs onto it and has a vision of this alien species destroying another world, as well as everything the alien has seen through Grant thus far. She rips it out and throws it against the wall, but that little fucker's not done yet. Kylie takes a curling iron to the slug, which finally kills it. She gets dressed and calls for her family, but Mom has been slugged. Her sisters call for help, but the door is locked, so Kylie tries to knock it down with a bronze horse statue. More slugs head upstairs and she busts a hole through the door to get in, but it's too late, the kids got slugged too. Damn. More slugs approach and Kylie hops out onto a lower roof and is forced to jump down into the yard. She watches her infected dad stumble out and narrowly beats the slugs to the family truck. She doesn't have the keys, so all she can do is watch as the slugs completely envelop the truck. Bill is calling for help as the four guys who got slugged are still alive. He heads to his cruiser to get a better radio signal and giving Starla a gun and telling them to move the four injured outside of the barn. Bill runs into a deer, but even that isn't safe from those pesky slugs. Starla isn't looking when Wally jolts awake, but that ain't Wally no more. Grant is communicating through him and was touched by what she said earlier about sticking together. He apologizes for strangling her and everything else he's done, but says it's all within his nature now. Margaret and McCready interrupt and the other fellas start waking up. The same thing happens at the Strootmeyers and Kylie's family surrounds the truck. They tell her to open the door and quickly get hostile. The boys identify Margaret as meat, but Starla whips out her shotgun. Grant's slug zombies ask why she's choosing their side, as she should be obeying her husband. Margaret tries to pull her gun, but zombie Trevor spits some green goo onto her neck, which starts burning and swelling. Zombie Wally says she won't shoot them, as she's always needed him to protect her, but Starla is going through character growth and blows Wally's head off. The slug wriggles out and Starla is out of shells. Kylie is still being terrorized and her dad starts smashing the windshield with a rock. Bill finally makes it to the house, distracting the zombies enough for Kylie to get out. She explains they're being controlled, but before they can skedaddle, a bunch of Grant surrogates swarm the yard, one of them attacking Bill. They manage to escape to his cruiser, avoiding some acid spits in the process. Bill spots Starla and McCready and runs over a zombie about to kill the latter, and Starla finishes them off with a fence post to the neck. They hop in the car and the bumbling zombies yell for Starla. Bill can finally reach Shelby, who hasn't seen any slugs yet. He tells her to get him on the line with the CDC, but before she can, it starts raining slugs. Hallelujah. Kylie finally explains her visions to the others, saying she briefly became a part of Grant's hive mind, and before it was Grant, it came from space. She says his real face looks like a needle, but he's always within another, traveling from world to world, killing everything on them. Some creatures he uses for reproducing, like he did with Brenda, and those slugs take over people to act like foot soldiers, and he eventually eats everyone and everything until there's nothing left. Starla likens it to a conscious disease, as it doesn't really reproduce, it simply spreads. They've made it back to the town center, which is already infested from the look of it. Bill calls Shelby again, but she's a part of the Grant hive mind now. Grant promises a surprise, which takes the form of a van that T-bones them. Bill wakes up to a horde of locals attacking the car and screaming, "Starla!" and they carry Mrs. Grant away. The rest of the horde goes for the meat. Bill is able to save Kylie, but McCready is still unconscious by the time they get a hold of him. The two escape and find a spot to lay low, and they watch Grant's surrogates drag off future meals. Bill remembers the grenade in the station and asks if he kills Grant if it would destroy the whole hive mind, and Kylie says maybe. That's enough for him, and he leaves her to ransack the station for weapons, but oh boy, he is not alone. The radio has been destroyed and he finds an infected deer munching on a corpse. The deer beats the absolute shit out of Bill, even biting him a couple good times, but Kylie takes it out with a good fire extinguisher smack. They hurry, knowing the horde now knows where they are, but grab the grenade and a couple of guns. They suspect the bodies are being carried to wherever Starla and the real Grant are. The pseudo-Grants lay Starla down and they freshen her up until she's awake. She's in her sexy garment and the Grants are excited for her to come down. Mayor McCready wakes up in a dark, slurpy-sounding room and uses his lighter to find a bunch of wombs munching on some man meat. McCready runs upstairs, but that just leads to more Grant tentacles. Starla fashions her hairbrush into a weapon, and Grant turns on their song as she makes her way down. Bill and Kylie get closer to the house, and McCready has been successfully recruited to the Grant Army Breeding Brigade. Starla finds a huge collage that Bill made of the two of them, and is a bit touched, at least until she sees what he's become. And baby, just feast your eyes on it. Part of Grant even extends outside where Bill and Kylie can see it. It's also where his wormhead soldiers join the shunting, get absorbed by him. Bill spots Starla, who is currently being accused of running off with Bill by Grant. He promises not to stop.
I'll keep throwing till I'm everywhere, till I'm all that is.
Starla apologizes and says she thought he was trying to kill her and that this transformation would require adjustments in any relationship. She reminds him of their memories together and he releases her. She appeals to the alien's loneliness, assuming it has never had someone to love. She promises to stay by his side while he does whatever he needs to survive. But she slips out her shank and stabs him in the head, causing all of his heads to scream. He smacks her away and Bill and Kylie get spotted. Bill shoots a couple and Grant starts throwing Starla around. Bill runs into McCready and promptly grants his wish of death. Grant says he's been around for 1 billion years and immediately knocks the live grenade out of Bill's hand. Bill grabs it again, but Grant knocks him out of a window and the grenade rolls into the pool. Shit. A horde is heading their way and Grant fucks Kylie up with a couch throw. He stabs Bill with his breeding tentacles and the many Grants seem to orgasm, but Bill is able to stick one of the tentacles into a leaking propane tank, filling him up with the gas. Grant drags his tentacles back, taking Bill with them, but before he can do anything, Starla shoots her big, slimy husband. Grant and his many heads fucking explode a bunch of times, and his army all collapse outside. Starla, Kylie, and the very battered Bill survive the explosion, and Kylie says you need both tentacles in you to get Slug pregnant, so he's okay. Alien nut. They head outside, and I'm pretty sure everyone who was in the hive mind is dead now? The 3 very traumatized survivors start a slow mosey to the next town over as the credits begin to roll. This is just a me thing, but I always enjoy a character walking off into the sunset kind of long shot. And James Gunn started right away with these damn post-credit scenes as a kitty cat licks at the parasite Barb to start a brand new invasion. And that's Slither! This was actually a lot of fun, and boy were there some great effects. Michael Rooker does a great job balancing the alien's maniacal ego and Grant's sometimes sympathetic and sometimes chauvinistic personality. I was really surprised that I felt bad for Grant sometimes, which speaks to Michael Rooker's ability to bring out the good and even the worst villains he plays. And big props to him and Brenda James for the crazy practical effects they spent a lot of time in. The alien parasite, which is canonically known as the Long One, is a fantastic monster. Its lifespan is really cool, starting in its Neil form to implant itself into a host. This becomes the primary host, in this case Grant, which slowly turns into a cross between the Thing and a giant squid. The primary host then uses its chest tentacles to insert slug embryos inside a host, who simply functions as a womb. Once the slugs are ready, the womb is ripped apart as they exit, similar to a baby xenomorph. The slugs enter the bodies of new victims, and their role is to gather food for the always hungry wombs, and to eventually merge with the primary host. Once the long one has devoured everything on the planet, it reverts back to its needle form and heads out to find other worlds. I loved all the different practical effects, and the visual effects partnered with them also hold up pretty well. The effects are great homages to John Carpenter, Cronenberg, Sam Raimi, Peter Jackson. And the mix of horror and comedy worked for me, and even here I could identify this very specific humor as James Gunn way before any of his Marvel films. Slither is kind of in this weird world between Troma and the MCU, which is very entertaining. The whole cast does a great job, and this small town community is really fleshed out by the time it gets destroyed, and I'm impressed they were willing to kill off basically the entire town. I'll have to watch it again in a few months, but it might be one of my new favorite horror comedies. It's a genre I'm pretty picky about, but Slither hits all the right notes for me. If you want a movie that relishes in B-movie kind of gore and violence, but also has the contemporary budget and technology to bring its fantastic monster to life, I definitely recommend Slither. Well, that's about it. Next week we'll be learning that life finds a way, because we're visiting Jurassic Park. Thank you all for joining me, and an extra thank you to my patrons. As always, I'm Noah Hook, and this has been Hamburgers and Horror. Stay safe out there. Thanks for watching my review of Slither. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe so you can keep up with my weekly horror reviews. And if you want to help support the channel further, be sure to check out my Patreon account. You'll be able to vote on future movies and franchises that I cover on the channel. Thanks, y'all.